back to Laythe Odyssey. What you're seeing here is a time-lapse of a lifter being created for the mapping and resource location satellite that we created in the last video. While I can't say it's a replica of any specific real-world craft, it does take a lot of inspiration from the Delta IV. I really like the Delta IV. So yeah, it's got a similar upper stage as the Delta Common Extensible Cryogenic Stage, I think that's what it's called. And then I modeled the bottom after the part that is part of Chaka Monkey that allows us to only have the engine bell. Now, the first launch that I attempted with this lifter doesn't work out so well. That's because its second stage engine is underpowered. So after I attempt to circularize, I just decided to revert to the editor and fix the engine, but in real life we would have calculated what kind of power we needed in a second stage engine so that it wouldn't have just failed on its first launch. Of course, I mean, maybe in a future episode I'll actually go through that. It would be a pretty interesting process, but here I didn't really have time, just decided to, well, I kind of need to get into orbit. So after fixing the problem with the first stage, or the second stage being underpowered, the launch went pretty well, so I've included some clips of it. Because the satellite has its own propulsion system, I'm able to detach the lifter's second stage and have the satellite circularize under its own power. This is really useful for reducing space junk, and it also means that you don't have to fuss with whatever trick there is for deorbiting the booster stage, like disabling the fuel or retro rockets or whatnot. So I'm hoping to integrate useful propulsion systems into all of my satellites during this series. And now that we've been circularized, all that's left to do is unfold the satellite and turn on the instruments. Now, I do make it spin around a little bit just to make sure that the solar panels work, but we've got a lot of panels and we have a lot of batteries, so I'm not really worried about power. So now the next stage of our Odyssey is to test the life support systems for the Kerbonauts that will be traveling to Laythe. And here's where I'd like to talk about Constellation for a minute. Constellation was a human spaceflight program which aimed to send humans to Mars in the 2030s. Many of the spacecraft concepts which belong to the program have been implemented by the Chaka Monkey mod, which I have installed and I've mentioned before. And in the Constellation program specifically, the idea was that to get to Mars, the technology should be tested in low Earth orbit and on the Moon first. So that's the way we're going to get to Laythe. First, we're going to test things in low Kerbal orbit, and then we're going to do a mission to the Moon, and then we can send these components and the mission to Laythe with confidence. So in game, our first test of these components will be a small little space station, the first of which I've designed here, and which I'm kind of mocking up the full layout of the space station in the editor. module itself, this truss is very heavy, and I thought this would be a good time to test the Epsilon Super Heavy Lifter, but the high part count and disproportionate length of the payload made the launch a pretty spectacular failure. So to launch this and the future modules into orbit, I'm going to have to design a 5-meter lifter, and I get some help from KW rocketry fuel tanks and engines. Now, so far the lifters worked pretty well, but I ended up having a couple issues with the second stage of the coupler. Finally, here we are with the core of our first space station in orbit. I've decided to call the station Aspasia, named after a Greek woman whose house became an intellectual center in Athens. It seems fitting for our first foray into the task of colonialization. Now, to make sure the batteries get charged and last until the next module comes up, I am extending the solar panels and radiators. Well, that's all for this episode. This has been Laythe Odyssey, and thanks for watching.